I do have to ask, so you were in the Navy mess. Did you get to see the butter?
I didn't see any butter.
Okay, they serve the butter in the presidential seal. There's like a template of the presidential seal, and it comes out, and it is the coolest thing.
I thought you were going to say it's like Biden's head or something.
No. It is the presidential seal in butter.
It really is just one of those things that is as cool as you think. This is Admissible. I'm Natalie Blazer, Dean of Admissions at UVA Law. Welcome back to Season 6 of the show. We're in a brand new year, 2025, and I have a lot of new content for you lined up this semester. On today's episode, we're talking about a topic I get questions about all the time, and that is externships. What is an externship, you might ask? We're going to talk about that. Basically, along with clinics and simulations and trial advocacy and other courses, externships are part of UVA Law's experiential learning offerings, meaning you're learning by doing. Rather than being in class with a casebook, you're doing actual legal work out in the real world while you are still a law student. So I never did an externship in law school. My understanding is we didn't have nearly as robust a program as we do now. So I myself actually had a lot of questions about how our externship program works and what our specific externship offerings are. So I'm super excited to dive into all of this with you. My guest today is third-year law student Mason Davenport. Mason is from Richmond, Virginia, and graduated from William & Mary in 2019 with a degree in philosophy. Prior to attending UVA Law, Mason worked in Virginia politics and an education nonprofit. While in law school, Mason served as the director of programming for the American Constitution Society, senator on the Student Bar Association. He was a member of the state and local government policy clinic and an editorial board member for the Journal of Law and Politics. Mason is also part of the Law and Public Service program, the Libel Show, Lambda Law, and he logged over 150 pro bono hours assisting in child homicide, family, and sex crime prosecutions through the Henrico Commonwealth Attorney's Office. Oh my goodness. Mason also served as a Kane for U.S. Senate Advisory Council member, as a Sunday school teacher with his church, and as a cohort member of the National Next Generation Leaders program through the American Constitution Society. When do you sleep? Mason, welcome to Admissible. I'm so happy you're here.
I'm so happy to be here.
That is really quite, oh my gosh, you are super involved. I loved, and such a diverse range of things that you're doing during law school. So I love to hear that.
Yeah, definitely dressing up as a Ken for libel is a top 3 law school moment.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing.
Yeah.
I was there last year. I'm so excited for this year's show. Okay, so I have to give the backstory to how this episode came to be. Right before Thanksgiving, I quite unexpectedly received an invitation to speak at the White House. I actually did not really believe that it was real. I didn't tell anybody on my team about it. I didn't make any plans. But then when they started asking, for my security details, my social security number, I realized that this was legit. I was invited by the Presidential Personnel Office, which
PPO.
PPO.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding, it's basically the office that's in charge of all of the presidential appointees in what was at the time the Biden-Harris administration. So the PPO was looking ahead to January when essentially all of those employees, all of the Biden-Harris appointees, staffers, were going to be out of a job due to the administration turning over. So you can imagine there's a lot of smart young people working in politics. They're potentially thinking about going to law school. They are going to be out of a job imminently. So the PPO, I think very wisely, and I was, of course, insanely honored, they invited me to speak to these staffers about law school, about UVA law, the admissions process, and so forth. So anyways, once I realized I was actually going to D.C. and I was going to be at the White House, I had to reach out to you, Mason, because at the time you were not with us here at UVA in Charlottesville, but you were doing your externship in the office of the White House Counsel, which has got to be the coolest externship you could possibly get. And I realized, okay, I got to see Mason. I'm going to go to the White House. All these things were coming together in my head, but also I need to do a show. I need to do a podcast about externships. So here we are. So before we start talking about all that, I want to back up a little bit. So I shared your bio at the top of the show, but I want to hear kind of in your words, like what made you want to go to law school and how did you get to UVA specifically?
So I knew from a really young age that I liked to argue. And God bless my mom. She put up with me through middle school and high school. I did speech and debate in high school, which really changed my life. And it was kind of at that moment that I had an idea that I wanted to do law. And then my senior year of high school, I was doing a mentorship, like a externship program for my high school at a local bankruptcy law firm. And I ended up, because of family reasons, I'll spare some of the details, I ended up having to drop out of high school halfway through my senior year. And it was that law firm that offered me a full-time job, and how I was able to pay to send myself to college the next semester. And that's where I fell in love with the law. Why UVA specifically? Ever since I was like 11 or 12 years old, my family had been lobbying me to go to UVA for undergrad, for law school, for anything. And I remember my uncle had taught me how to tie a bow tie one year. And then for Christmas that year, my aunt and my uncle got me a UVA bow tie that I could wear because they really wanted me to attend the University of Virginia. And I'll tell you what, as a Virginian, lifelong Virginian, love Virginia, love DC, love the area, when I was applying to law schools, I knew that UVA was my number one choice. And I ended up wearing my bow tie to the interview, and no brainer as to why I wanted to come to UVA.
I love that story. And I'm just smiling ear to ear thinking how proud, your family must be having dreamed of this for you for like a decade plus. So that's amazing. And we're so lucky that you're here. So you ended up at UVA Law. You started in the fall of 2022. Clearly, you came in with an interest in politics. You worked at a law firm. I feel like you kind of came in, I would say, knowing your interest more than the average applicant. Your 1L year, of course, you kind of have to do the same curriculum that everyone else is doing. What did you do your 1L summer, your 2L year, like to sort of further your interests?
Yeah, so my 1L summer, I worked at the Department of Justice in the Constitutional Torts section of the Civil Division. So I was doing kind of litigation where the United States is a defendant and there's allegations relating to some violation of a constitutional rights. So one of the big cases that came out of that section was the Ashcroft v. Iqbal case, was originally litigated by the constitutional torts folks. You will learn what Ashcroft v. Iqbal is your first year of law school, no matter where you go. Very cool. So I loved it, and it was a very kind of traditional litigation, a very reading, writing, intensive practice, and loved the people I worked with. Just kind, smart, wonderful folks. Can't speak more highly of DOJ. But I realized that I wanted something a little bit more fast-paced and a little bit more interpersonal long-term for my career. And so that's when I went, okay, hold on a second. Let me explore kind of a more people interactive litigation / let's look at the public policy side, which is when I got involved with the State and Local Government Policy Clinic here at Virginia during my second year of law school. Clinics are great, y'all. Cannot speak more highly. Loved working with professors Katie Ryan and Andy Block. They were wonderful mentors, and you got to work through the public policy making process from start to finish. I got to write the underlying policy research for what then became drafting the bill that then was picked up by state legislators in the Virginia General Assembly. And then we worked from start until literal passage of the bill with the assembly members. It was an incredible learning experience. I can't speak more highly of it. Intense. I was doing a lot of running around the General Assembly building this time last year. So one of the issues that I got to work on was the termination of parental rights of rapists in Virginia. And as you kind of highlighted, I'd worked on the prosecutorial side of that in the Henrico Commonwealth's attorney's office. And then I was able to work with survivors, with rape survivor advocacy groups, pro-child groups, to then advocate for moving the ball and making real change on this issue for my community and for my state, my Commonwealth. It's Commonwealth, y'all. My Commonwealth. And that was incredible. And also what I got to do at the White House and what was so incredible about that, too.
I mean, the thread here, like you've just continued with this amazing work from even pre-law school through. I mean, it's just awesome. So that was your 2L year. 2L summer, did you stay the public service route? Did you try something else?
Yeah. So I ended up doing the OGI on grounds interview process, and I knew that I wanted to be in D.C., and so I was lucky enough to join Winston & Strawn for their summer program. It was really fantastic. I can't speak more highly of Winston & Strawn, and many of the partners that I got to work with were really supportive of me taking this opportunity in the fall to go work at the White House with the White House counsel's office. So, I got to try the kind of more intense private practice litigation work with Winston in the summer. Got to save a little bit of money so that I could pay those D.C. prices during the fall, and then have been very supported by them to come and go to the White House and work in the West Wing afterwards.
Awesome. I think it's great for people to get a mix of public service, private practice. Even people who have a super bent one way or another, you're learning the way things work into what can be two totally different universes in terms of the people you're working with, the cases you're working on. So I think that's amazing.
And I'll just say too is a lot of the folks that I worked with over the fall time are folks that pop in and out, right? They do 6 years in private practice. They learn how to be an incredible litigator or mergers and acquisitions attorney, and then they take what they've learned to then go work in a more political role for an administration. Absolutely. And sometimes your team wins, sometimes your team loses, and those folks go back into private practice and kind of make a career out of that.
Right. Absolutely. So if nothing else, people should know that a career after law school is far from a linear career. You can absolutely, especially with UVA law degree, go do a lot of different things, especially in the DC world. There's always going to be a UVA law alum there, or there's always going to be that connection and that network. So that's awesome. Okay. With all that being said, let's dive into the topic of the day, externships. I want to start by defining really what an externship is. So according to our externships website, externships combine substantial practical legal work for a government or nonprofit organization with academic inquiry through readings, papers, and in the case of UVA Law in DC, a weekly seminar. Externs learn to work under close supervision, receive feedback, and engage in self-assessment. The externship program assists students in adjusting to their roles as professionals, becoming better problem solvers, and developing interpersonal and professional skills from direct observation of and experience in the practice of law. So there's the UVA Law in DC externship, but then there's another category called full-time externship. Was yours also a full-time externship?
So it would have qualified as a full-time externship.
Okay.
And I think the kind of qualifications are the same. The difference with the UVA Law in DC program is we have an incredible professor, Ann Sprightly Ryan, who runs the externship program, who comes up and does the seminar every week in D.C. And so there's the classroom component. We were able to speak to a bunch of UVA law alums doing incredible things in the district. We had a Supreme Court clerk who is working for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce came in and speak. We had Ted Cruz's senatorial legal aide came in and spoke. Just so many different UVA law alums doing incredible things in D.C. and across the country that could then come and speak to us and talk about their career paths in public service.
So I've always wondered this. Where is the seminar actually held?
Yeah. So there is a UVA Darden building in Arlington, Virginia. And it's like on the 30th floor of the building. You can see the entire city.
Wow.
It's gorgeous. It was a 2 metro stop ride for me from
Amazing.
White House over. So it was very convenient. And then we would meet up there. We would get dinner, which was great. I
Nice.
definitely, don't tell anyone this, but I packed my own
Like Tupperware?
yes, Tupperware.
No.
I packed my own Tupperware and would bring food with
I
me
mean, you're
back.
a law student. This
Yes.
is tracking.
Yeah, the hustle is real. And then
Yeah.
they started putting out signs, do not bring Tupperware.
Oh.
And so I would grab one of the coffee cups and stuff
Oh
the
my
coffee
goodness.
cups full.
Oh my
Look,
goodness.
your boy was
Loophole,
hungry
loophole.
and needed
Yeah.
some steak.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So you meet once a week for like the
Yes.
classroom sort of component.
Yep.
And so it's you and all the other like externs who are in DC at that time.
Yes.
So just like ballpark, how many people is that in a semester?
So I think this semester there were 9 of us.
Oh, okay.
And then don't quote me on the broader externship numbers,
Yeah.
but we had people all over the country.
Totally. And we're going to talk about that because there was an article recently about where some of our students were. And like, I'm going to talk about some of our offerings and it's just amazing. So I'm really excited that we're talking about it. Okay. So I just mentioned this, so we might as well do it now. The offerings. So you were at the Office of the White House Counsel, which I think is just, I'm going to say, probably one of the coolest ones that you can do. But there are a lot of really cool options.
Yes.
And when I looked at like kind of the sampling, I just want people to know kind of what the offerings are. First of all, you can extern for Judge Lisa Lorish, who was my classmate. She's class of 2008. She's on the Virginia Court of Appeals in Charlottesville. Highly recommend Judge Lorish. I know her as Lisa, is amazing. You can work at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Western District of Virginia right here in Charlottesville. You can go to the DOJ, the U.S. Department of Justice in the Civil Division in Washington, D.C. You can go, this one I think is really cool, and I would probably choose maybe the UVA Athletics Compliance Office. I just think that would be awesome. Like all the things that are going on with athletics and I don't know. I think that would be cool. You can also, this one is amazing, work at the British Institute of International and Comparative Law in London. That's awesome. You can work for Judge Timothy Reif at the U.S. Court of International Trade in New York. You can work at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and Major Economic Crimes Bureau, also in New York. Another one of our alums, Justice Gregory Massing, Massachusetts Court of Appeals in Boston. Like, this is just, these are not just you're working in some law office in Charlottesville. These are amazing. And then I'll just list some of the UVA Law and DC options: the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Federal Trade Commission, the National Labor Relations Board, the DOJ, but the Criminal Division, Narcotic and Dangerous Drug Section, U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, White House Council on Environmental Quality, and of course, yours, the White House Counsel's Office. I really can't reiterate enough how cool this would be. This is not your summer job. This is like while you're still in school. This is on top of whatever you're doing as a 1L summer or 2L summer. And I just think the experience you get and the people you meet, I just think that's amazing that we offer all of this.
And you can literally go anywhere, right? So those are some of the places that UVA law students have been
So
placed.
you can like make
but
your
you
own.
can apply anywhere. So I knew that I wanted to go to the counsel's office and applied through there and kind of did that independently and worked with the Office of Public Interest, which does incredible work. Shout out to Dawn. You rock. She really helped me prepare
Love
for the
Dawn.
interview process. And they will help you find whatever placement you want. So you typically have to apply, and it's not the same thing every year. But if you have a place you want to work, and more often than not, they're going to be happy to have free help
from a UVA
with
law
them
student.
from a UVA law student, then you can go work there for the semester.
I'm so glad you flagged that
Yep.
because I totally forgot to point that out. Yeah, this is like just the tip of the iceberg kind of, because if there's something else you want to do, I mean, that's just amazing. This is making me want to go to law school all over again. So now that I hope we've given listeners like a decent overview of what an externship actually is. And, I just want to clarify for people, you were doing your once a week at night course. But other than that, people should think of externship as it's a job.
Yes.
Like, you're not going to other classes unless you're doing one of the part-time externships I mentioned. This is like you're just kind of working. It's like an internship.
Yeah. So you have some ABA requirements, and the ABA is pretty restrictive on what experiential learning has to do. So there's reflection journals that you have to submit. There's a certain number of classes, if you're in a classroom setting, that you have to sit for. And then we had a final paper and then like a final reflection leaving our externship placements. But other than that, we were working full time.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. So given your background and experience that we already discussed, and the fact that you did like essentially an externship while you were still in high school, like I see that the practical learning by doing is like really up your alley.
Yeah.
So it seemed like externing in law school was like a natural sort of progression for you. Talk about the timing though.
Yeah. So don't quote me on this, but I think you have to get special permission to do a part-time externship as a 2L, and that's on a kind of case-by-case basis. I think we only allow for studying abroad or externing outside of Charlottesville during the 3L.
Yes, I know that for sure for study abroad. So, okay, so that makes sense. And I know UVA law in D.C., based on my research, is only for your fall of 3L year.
It's for your fall 3L year.
Okay, great. So walk us through just kind of the application process and the timeline. So you know it's going to be the fall of your 3L year. When does the application open? What do you have to do? Just talk about that.
So to clarify, are you talking the White House internship program application or the UVA law externship application?
Oh, well, I guess both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I started applying in like May or June, and then I was interviewed in mid-June for the counsel's position in the fall, and then got the like final offer contingent on passing the security clearance.
Right.
The pretty extensive background check, I guess, in late June. I had worked on all my materials. There's like a 2-week window. It might be 3 weeks, but it's a very short window of the website does not exist on the White House page. It then exists, and then it closes within a 3 or 4 week span.
Wow.
And you get your recommendation letters, and then you write a number of essays. It's a pretty lengthy process. You then wait and hope that you get an email for an interview. Again, shout out Dawn for really helping me prep for that interview. And then for the externship program, forgive me because 2L spring was a bit of a blur. I was doing a lot of stuff. It was a great time.
Yeah.
I loved it, but I was a little busy. I think you apply in March, April, and you like write about your placement and why you want to go and what would be the learning value of being in that space.
Right.
And honestly, applying to the counsel's office had a pretty natural kind of wrote itself on why you would learn a lot there, why I would learn a lot there.
Yeah.
And so I think most people either know they're going to be at a certain place, they've already applied or talked to the employer or hosting organization by April. I think the counsel's office is a little different just because the application is so much later. But I think most folks knew where they were going to be placed and then could write about that by April. Sure.
So that makes sense. So you don't just apply to the externship program and they say, great, we're going to place you in White House counsel, or the DOJ or wherever. No, you independently have to get yourself accepted by the agency, the organization, the nonprofit, whatever it is. And then ideally with that information in hand, you go apply for the externship through UVA.
Exactly. And with a reminder of the Office of Public Interest is there to support you in the application process for brainstorming, all of the UVA law connections at different places across the country, especially in D.C., that those are all avenues and pathways that you can find
Right.
a placement.
And this makes sense. And so just to clarify for our listeners, so the Public Service Center, it's so there's a lot of different components to it, but there's a career component where, you mentioned Dawn Davison, who's amazing. She's a career counselor. So you could see why someone who's going for an externship, especially as prestigious as the one you got, you want to talk through the interview process. You want to talk through your resume, your letters, things like that, because it is a professional experience. So, okay, given everything you just shared about sort of how the application process works, the timeline, from your perspective, is it a super competitive process? Does it depend on which externship you're going for? Does it depend on, what semester you're trying to get it? Like, can you just speak a little to that?
So one of the incredible things about UVA Law, and one of the reasons why I knew I wanted to come to UVA Law, is UVA Law is got a name brand, for better or for worse, that is never going to close a door for you. That still means that you have to network and do well and kind of show interest and whatever it might be to find a particular job, but there's no door in the legal profession that's going to be closed because you went to UVA as opposed to
Right.
another school. And so I think in that kind of circumstance, you can absolutely get an externship
Yes.
if you want it, right? And there are varying levels of how competitive that might look like. So if you wanted to get DOJ in the appellate litigation section, which we had an extern at this past semester,
Yeah.
that's pretty competitive, right?
Of
Because it's the
course.
appellate litigation in Department of Justice, Main Justice, and DC. That's going to be tough, and there's only a certain number of spots for that. But if you have a passion for XYZ and know someone there, or there's a UVA person there or whatnot, you can absolutely find placement.
Yes.
Now, in all honesty, there are only a certain number of slots at White House Counsel's office, right? So it's competitive, but UVA is in that competition. And I should also say that the Biden-Harris administration has been really committed to, or was really committed to, hiring a professional and intern class reflective of the entire United States. But it's very competitive,
Absolutely.
And going to UVA certainly didn't hurt.
Did not hurt, and it's sort of like jobs. I mean, getting a job at Winston Strawn or at Williams and Connolly or Skadden or wherever, those are super competitive jobs. But UVA Law is blanketing the top legal jobs, just like they are with externship clinics, all that. So I don't want that to put to scare people, because if you're at UVA Law, those opportunities are there for the taking.
And one of the really wonderful things about the UVA Law in DC program in the fall is that for the really high volume applicant jobs, especially at DOJ or some of the agencies, during the summer, there are more people that have the availability to come to DC and apply for those positions. And then during the fall time, there are plenty of schools that do have externship opportunities, but it's fewer than the number of applicants that could apply during the summertime. And so it tends to be slightly easier to find a placement wherever you want to in the fall, which allows you to be especially competitive during the fall.
Okay, that's a really good thing to point out to people. Okay, great. So we talked a little bit about the different sort of externship categories, and I listed the rather long but helpful description of what an externship really is. So there's the credit hours. I'm just curious how that works, because like we mentioned, an externship is kind of like your job. And so you're getting 13 credits. Is that similar to the credits you would be taking 3L fall anyway?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to take 13 credits this semester.
This semester. Okay.
I took 13 credits last semester.
Yeah.
It's 10 ungraded, pass-fail credits, and then 3 graded, which is graded based on a number of things, and primarily the final paper that you write.
The big paper. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you were living in D.C. for the fall. You're back now. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious. Did you come back a lot? Did you miss being at UVA? Did you miss Charlottesville?
Okay. So I had really serious FOMO
Oh my God.
all semester.
I can imagine.
I would see the photos of friends at like
Yeah.
Faux Field, or the Halloween party was really tough for me to miss. I did come back a couple times
Okay.
for the football games.
Oh, that's great.
So, got to tailgate with some friends and hang out
Yeah.
and see folks. I was doing a lot more in September and early October,
Mm-hmm.
and it was great. But then, so part of the White House internship program, you can volunteer for events that are happening on the White House grounds. And they oftentimes
cool.
happen during Saturday and Sunday. And so, for example, I got to be a volunteer staffer that worked the South Lawn event for the World AIDS Remembrance
Wow.
Day. And it was the first time that the AIDS quilt had been on display
Wow.
at the White House. And it was incredibly moving, impactful event because I was working the early part of it. I had over an hour kind of to myself, walking through reading some of the AIDS quilts. And I'm a gay man in my late 20s, and so many of the people who the quilt was remembering were gay men who died of HIV/AIDS in their late 20s and early 30s. And that was one of those events that I never would have been able to experience if I had been traveling on the weekends so much.
Yeah.
And so in early October, I had gone back to Charlottesville. I'd had a great time, but I'd missed out on one of those big White House
Yeah.
events. And I made a decision that I was going to pull back on traveling and focus more on being in D.C. and getting everything I could out of the externship experience. Not because I didn't love UVA.
Of course.
Go Who's, even though our football team sucks. It is what it is, guys. But next year's our year. It's going to be great. It's going to be different. Even though I really missed UVA, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I didn't want to be gone and miss something in the White House.
Well, you want to put your whole self into it. And I definitely understand the pull to Charlottesville and your friends and everything, but once in a lifetime, right? Like, you're not going to have access to those things. What about the turkey pardoning? Was that on offer?
So there were people that got to go to
Okay.
the turkey pardon. After the election was a very busy time.
Yeah.
And so I stayed busy.
I mean, not every extern in the White House counsel's office would be there during an election year. I'm sure that was crazy on a number of levels.
Yeah, your words, not mine.
Yeah.
Here's
We don't
what
need to go into
Yeah,
it.
well, here's what I will say. I will forever be grateful for the opportunity to witness history.
Yeah.
I was the legal intern, so I was bottom rung of the totem pole, but the things that I got to work on, the conversations that I got to sit in on, the impact that our office and the Biden-Harris administration made, especially in this moment
Yeah.
where it's turning over from one administration to the next,
Yeah.
it is something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life, and I am incredibly grateful
Yeah.
for the opportunity and for UVA Law in D.C. for making it possible.
Well, I was going to say, how special it is that you got to be there, but also I'm so glad that you were out there representing UVA Law sort of in the White House and to the world. And so that just makes us look great. So we've been sitting here for a while and we haven't even gotten into, I know that because obviously there are confidentiality concerns and national security and all these things. I know you can't really talk that much in detail about what you did, but high level, can you give folks a sense of what you did in the White House counsel's office?
Yeah. I did legal things and I did some legal policy things.
Cool.
And sometimes I did more legal things.
And that's all they're getting.
Yeah, no, I'll give you a little bit more. So I did a lot of memo writing. It was
Okay.
a lot of legal research supporting kind of the policy teams throughout the White House. It was incredibly wide-ranging work. I got to work with some of the best attorneys in the world. I remember talking with one of my colleagues on one of the teams that I was staffed on and saying, look, I'm feeling a lot of imposter syndrome right now. Everyone on this team, except for one person, was a Supreme Court clerk. 2-3 people were Rhodes Scholars.
Wow.
Another couple were Solicitor General Fellows. It was kind of a stacked team.
Yeah.
I was like, I am just a third-year law student that, I go to a good school and I've done well and I'm working hard, but like, what am I doing here? Like, how can be value added? And she gave me some really great advice. She said, if you didn't have a little bit of imposter syndrome, you would be crazy because these are the best of the best.
Or an egomaniac.
Yes, yeah.
Which is worse, I think.
No, we don't need that.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
that's not the UVA law vibe.
it is not. It is not. And it's good. I mean, it's good. I say this every year at orientation, but like you don't want to be the smartest person or the most accomplished person. You always want to have people that you're in awe of that you're working with. And you have to remind yourself, like, you're right there with them. Like, you belong there too. If they're there for good reasons, you're there for good reasons. So, do you have like a one memory or moment that stands out from your externship?
So there's a few.
Okay.
So I remember my last day. My last week was pretty intense.
Yeah. Was that the week I was there?
It was the week after you were there. It was pretty intense. I was working hard.
Yeah.
And I was part of the last checkout group of the interns in the building. They release you in stages. And I get a call from one of the team members that I've been working with. And it's 5 minutes before I'm supposed to be downstairs to turn in my equipment. And they give me this legal question and said, we really need you to get this done. And so I ended up working an hour and a half after I was supposed to check out to finish up this last legal question, which I nailed. I did really good with it.
Amazing.
And then left like an hour and a half after I was supposed to. And if that wasn't just the most incredible way to end my externship, walking down with my supervisor out of the building, waving goodbye to West Exec in the West Wing, and then the Eisenhower Executive Office building where I sat.
I mean, I have chills. And by the way, for listeners, if you don't think that working extra hours and overtime counts as like a fond memory, lawyering might not be for you, because that's going to be part of it. And when obviously you can't speak to what the legal issue was, but obviously it was something pressing enough and urgent enough. And like, those are the coolest moments as a lawyer when, hey, Mason, we need you. Like, we need you on this. And now, especially having been there, seeing your office and just being in the majesty that is the West Wing and the Eisenhower building, especially at Christmas time. And like, I grew up in the DC area, and I of course have seen the White House from the outside a bazillion times, but I had never been inside. And, having watched the West Wing, it really does live up to sort of the grandeur and all of what you imagine it to be, but even cooler.
Yeah, so I sat on the second floor of the Eisenhower Executive Office building, which is the building directly across from the West Wing.
Yeah.
And right next to us was Vice President Harris's
So cool.
Eisenhower offices. So you didn't know who you would meet
Totally.
literally in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Right? There were a few times where I did like a double take in the bathroom
Oh my
going
God,
in.
I bet.
And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I ran into
Yeah.
who? And I remember one day I was going on a walk just to clear my head for 5 minutes because, you're behind a screen, kind of in a
Sure.
dark, small room,
Yeah.
working hard. And there was a bunch of Secret Service and commotion. And I turn around and I look, and it's Vice President Harris strolling through
So
the
cool.
second floor. And then I turn the corner because I'm like, I got to get out of here. And I see all of these press cameras are fixed on
So you're
this
like
wing.
in the shot.
So I'm in the shot. So I'm like, okay, I got to sprint out of here, running past, and then realized a couple hours later that it was when the VP was meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky when he came to Washington to meet president, the VP, and president-elect, or now President Donald Trump.
Wow.
When he was doing the full tour.
Yeah.
And I was like trying to get out of the way of that moment.
Again, you were like a witness to history. Well, you were a part of history. I mean, the things that you were working on. I remember after our session, they took me over to the Navy mess, like in the West Wing, and they explained to me, which I did not know, that each branch of the military is responsible for a different thing for the president. So the Navy, the food and the drink, I got a nice, lovely cup of tea, and I saved that paper cup.
Yeah.
And I'll save it forever because it has the presidential seal on it. Yeah. But then, so you have the Air Force One, obviously.
Yep. There's Marine One.
Marine One, right.
Et cetera, et cetera.
So cool.
It is absolutely awesome, the number of things that you will learn about the United States, our history, et cetera. Just being in the building, I sat near, or technically in, the Secretary of War suite, which was where like the Spanish-American War and the World War I was planned before it was moved over to the now Pentagon building. And
that's so cool.
That was just one of those casual moments. Right. It is one of those places where the best of America gets to come, and I was constantly inspired every day. You got to meet change makers in local communities that were coming in and talking about their work. Astronauts. I met so many astronauts. They're the coolest people.
I bet.
And they're smart, and they're really physically fit. And you're like, you can't be both of those things.
Not fair.
Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And I counted my lucky stars. I think I told you I would get choked up literally every morning on my walk-in, seeing the White House, and then walking over to the Eisenhower Executive Office building. I mean, this was my life dream. My life dream was to go work for the President of the United States. And I got to do that. And I got to do that at 28 years old as a third-year law student. And that rocks.
Yeah. And again, as a representative of UVA Law, I couldn't just be prouder that you were out there doing all those things. So, again, don't want to get choked up, but seeing people come from like applicant stage to student too. I remember when you came to our office after you knew that you were getting this opportunity, and that was like everybody was screaming and jumping up and down. So it's really full circle.
I was definitely crying. Yeah. Happy tears. Yeah.
So happy for you. Okay, so kind of wrapping up here, if someone's out there considering like doing an externship, it seems obvious to me that this is going to prepare you extremely well for your career, not just because you were in the White House and that's just carries such amazing weight, but just the types of things you were working on, the high pressure environment, the high stakes. Like, tell us a little bit about how you feel like that has prepared you for your long-term legal career.
Yeah. So one of the things that I really loved about my colleagues was not only were they some of the brightest and best that this country has to offer, everyone was generally kind. And there was a no jerk policy on the team. And that held true to me 100% in the counsel's office. That you can be a special assistant to the president and still be incredibly kind to the cleaning staff who is supporting the mission in a different capacity, right? That was number one, that it didn't matter what the level of the person, everyone was kind. So that's one.
Well, and I'll just say really quick, that just also helps you, I think, going into your career, knowing that you don't need to tolerate anything less than that. If they can be, if people can be kind and treat everyone with respect at that level of and the high stakes and the politicized nature of everything, then like certainly you know that you are entitled to that at every stage of your career, no matter where you're working. So I just think that's like a good lesson to learn.
Yeah. And in terms of kind of skill sets or things that I really practiced, I did lots of legal work. I did lots of writing and researching, etc. But I think some things that stood out to me was I had to learn and practice managing up because there was so many different demands on my time. Sometimes you would get
you have to say no,
12 different things, and you would say, okay, here's the priority list, and I can get this done on Friday. If that's too late for you and you really need it done, then here's the other person who I'm working on work for.
Right.
Let's chat through what the priority level should be. So that was one of the skills of managing really busy people's expectations. I think another really important skill set was everyone was so kind and also extremely busy. And it wasn't because they were bad at time management or whatnot. It's because literally like running a country.
Yeah.
And so I would oftentimes have 5 minutes or less to get the explanation of a like pretty major assignment. And I would have to figure out what the person was asking me. I would get the contours of the assignment and then figure out what the finished product was. And I was really, really good at it, like intuiting what folks needed. And one or two times I kind of missed the mark a little bit. I remember for one writing assignment, the person was looking for a slightly different tone in the memo, and he let me know. And so I was able to tweak it and deliver to him what he was looking for. And then how do you get feedback from folks who are, again, really busy?
Who don't have time.
Who, again, wonderful people, but maybe don't have the time to go line by line to edit your writing, is I would go through and see what was the finished product that went out the door and how did that look similar or different to what I had turned in, or if it was a memo prepping for a meeting, sitting in on the meeting and hearing what the contours of the conversation was to see, okay, did I get all of the major legal points in the memo that I wrote, or did I miss anything? And I remember being in one meeting going, yeah, I nailed it. I got every case that they had cited, and this was really helpful, and so many other things.
Right,
like,
so many other things.
I could go on for quite a long time, but I think those were some of the big ones.
Well, I think you hit on some really important ones. It sounds like you had to definitely be a self-starter and proactive, and
100%.
There's no hand-holding, and
There's
there's
not.
no, like, you're getting thrown into the deep end, and I think that's just good for any young lawyer to know, because there isn't going to be that. You do have to figure things out for yourself. I remember at my law firm, a partner said to me, it is not your job to decide. He said this in a very kind way, but like, I should never be the one deciding which assignment I work on. That needs to be communicated from above. And it's not always. So it's their job to say, no, put that aside, you're doing this. Seeing in practice like how important that is and the people skills and all of that.
And one of the things that I really appreciated about my colleagues was I think attorneys can get a bad rap as being the people who come up with every reason why something shouldn't happen or shouldn't be done a certain way. And one of the things that my colleagues were really good at, I think, that I got to practice over the last 4 months was how do we get to a yes, right? So not just figuring out what is the answer to the question posed, but how do we get to the solution? What is the problem the question is actually asking to solve? So how do we get to that solution from what is being asked? And that's an intuition. It's something that you practice, but you're trying to figure out how to make something happen rather than just answer what's directly in front of you.
Right.
Anticipating the next step.
Anticipating, a lot of what lawyers do is anticipating the other side and arguments and all these things that are not in the description on the website of what an externship is, but that are so hugely important, again, for like your development as an attorney. And so now, since our audience is mostly applicants, current applicants, or folks who are maybe they're already admitted and they're deciding where to go, or maybe they're thinking about applying to law school next year, or just what advice would you give to somebody who's not in law school yet, but who's on the journey, whether it's during their application cycle or whether it's deciding where to go, anything that you just think people should know?
Yeah. So one, I would say be judicious with your time on the internet / the rabbit hole of checking admissions, decision,
status
launch
checker,
pages, etc. You're going to drive yourself insane, and it doesn't make things move any faster.
True.
Promise.
True.
Well, I can't say I promise. I assume going on the website doesn't. No,
it
okay.
doesn't.
All right. So, like, do yourself and your mental health a favor and take a step back there. 2, the biggest thing for me in the last 5 years that I just didn't appreciate, but has been huge, is staying active. And whatever like physical exercise means to you, and that can look different for all kinds of people. But I know when I was going through the process and I would get really anxious, the one surefire thing that I could do that would lessen my anxiety a bit was go on a run or go to the gym or walk with family and friends. And it just cuts it just a little bit. And it doesn't have to be super crazy CrossFit or whatever, but something.
A walk in fresh air. Yep. I am like a huge fan of
touching
the walk.
Grass.
Yes.
Yep.
I mean, I know myself, I love just being out in nature and fresh air, but really like science, like there are studies that say like it reduces your anxiety. So I definitely co-sign that advice.
And then the generic, wherever you get admitted, wherever you end up going, if you are passionate about the law or passionate about something in the law, and you know you want to go to law school, maybe you get into UVA, maybe you don't. Who knows? You're going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
Like, if there's one thing that I've learned in my life, it's that following my passion and the thing that I care about has helped me drive myself to where I am now and kind of navigate the different twists and turns of life. And so if you know you have that passion, if you know you have that love, whether it's here, whether it's somewhere else, you'll be able to live a good life and be okay.
Yeah, and I will add, and you put in the work, and you put in the work that you have, Mason. You get out of it what you put into it. It's a lot of hard work. Having the passion, absolutely, and following what is true to you, and also not being afraid of hard work. I think that's incredible advice. So thank you. Yeah. Wow, Mason, this was so much fun.
This was great. Thank you so much.
I got to see you in December at the White House at Christmas time. I get to see you now in the studio, back for your final semester. I hope that you will come by and not be a stranger to admissions.
I mean, you know how much I love the candy, so
we do have great
I'll
candy.
be there.
This has been Admissible with me, Dean Natalie Blazer at the University of Virginia School of Law. My guest today was third-year law student Mason Davenport. The next episode of Admissible will be out soon. In the meantime, you can follow the show on Instagram at @AdmissiblePodcast. And as a reminder, Admissible is now on YouTube. You can check out all new episodes there, along with some vintage content we're sharing to help guide you through this application season. Thanks so much for listening, and please remember to rate the show wherever you listen to podcasts.